In this video, I'm going to demonstrate that intolerance and discrimination, as well as association, are an important part of human nature, and any attempt to suppress them does not only account as a criminal act, but it will also inevitably result in increasing tensions and cause the emergence of violent conflicts between groups. I will divide this video into 4 segments. First, I will give a biological explanation about the nature of intolerance and whether it is a good thing. Second, I will provide historical examples to show the success of homogeneous societies and the failure of multiculturalism. Third, I will justify the ethics of discrimination and how it correlates with property rights. And, finally, I will apply all of this to groups such as furries. First, to show that tolerant association and intolerance-driven disassociation is part of human nature, we will take a look at the animal world to see if we can recognize these patterns, as this would strongly suggest that these behaviors can be innate behaviors that similarly apply to humans. The most prominent example of this behavior that can be easily observed is the way animals defend their territories from outsiders. This is an example of disassociation. Some animals refuse to tolerate other individuals or species in their group for their genetic differences or behavior. On the other hand, in the animal world, we can recognize associative behaviors. Animals of the same species, and even different ones, often live together and help each other. Some species go as far as being altruistic, and they sacrifice themselves for the survival of other individuals in their own species. The animal world shows that individuals make use of association and disassociation. Animals show positive or negative preferences towards other individuals. Typically, they show intolerance against those who are genetically different and tolerance towards those who are similar, with a few exceptions. Humans appear to be no different. The world has been always divided into regions where a specific ethnicity or cultural group dominates. The same thing can be observed on a micro level, where both cultural similarities and genetically based assortative mating have an influence on human relationships. These characteristics are all examples of individual association with likes and disassociation with unlikes. The conclusion is as follows: intolerance, tolerance, and the associative behavior that comes with it is a natural human behavior. It is determined by an individual's values, which can have its roots in learned past experiences about individuals, but more often it is rooted in genetic similarity. Now that we have established that discrimination is a fundamental part of human and animal behavior, it would be wise to reflect on the positives of this behavior. I believe that in such a case where we are trying to argue whether nature is good or bad, there is no way we can reach a conclusion. Personally, I would not even consider the study of good or bad nature of nature itself, as nature just simply works in a specific way as a part of a plan unchangeably and without the ability to fail. For this reason, the ethics of the disassociative behavior of animals should not be disputed, as animals are not moral actors. They are simply part of nature. The case with humans is similar. Unconsciously, and therefore in a barely controllable way, we have things that we tolerate and other things that we don't tolerate, which can only change through gaining new experiences, getting mental treatment, or not at all. It is impossible to act against these unconscious preferences rationally, as reason always decides in the favor of your own values. To not discriminate, you need something that you value more than your tolerance in order to make the rational decision to not discriminate against someone. For example, a doctor most likely doesn't want to refuse to treat a patient for his political beliefs, as that would go against his more important values, such as to profit from the treatment, or his dedication to treat patients equally. This is simply how nature works, and disputing whether having tolerance and intolerance towards certain things is bad or good does not make much sense. But to still give you something, I'm going to list the facts that are a result of this natural phenomenon. First, tolerance and intolerance makes individuals unique. If our feelings were neutral and we would not have unique values on tolerance, we would all just be the same. We would all have the same interests and practice the same code of ethics, which is, if we look at it from our perspective, would be really boring. Second, with no tolerance, there would be no love, no true friendships, and basically any feelings regarding liking or disliking something would simply not exist. Note also that hate cannot exist without love, as hate is the absence of love. This also means that if love exists, so does hate, otherwise love would lose its uniqueness. There are numerous historical examples to buttress the thesis of the video, which I decided to share here. First, I will focus on how history proves that association and disassociation is part of human nature, and then later show examples to buttress my statement that trying to suppress this behavior never works out. First, the spread of nationalist ideas from the beginning of the 19th century, which was, by the way, the product of the leftist side of the French Revolution, already gives us a basic idea that associating with one's ethnicity has been a really convincing idea for people, so much that nationalism became a standard worldwide since. And I would like to make a quick note here. I am not in favor of nationalism in any way. I would of course tolerate those who are ethnically close to me, aka my nation. However, nationalism is an ideology that applies this in wrong ways. First, there is no clear boundary that defines what a nation is. Therefore, a nation-state is impossible to define. Second, it promotes statism, which is unethical. And third, almost every time it is adopted, it contradicts itself. This is related to the first problem. For example, Indian nationalists would say Pakistan should not be independent, but Pakistani nationalists would state otherwise. Hitler's conquest of Austria is a similar example. Austrians did not consider themselves Germans, but Hitler thought vice versa. In short, it's a failure. The second historical phenomenon to buttress the widespread existence of intolerance and tolerance is the emergence of cultural centers, especially in the recent globalized period. These places are examples where people move to associate with local population who they tolerate and to leave behind the culture they did not tolerate. There are a lot of examples, I'm going to list them quickly. Paris is regarded as a center of fashion and art in Europe, which attracted several artists. Los Angeles in California became a home of movie production. Jews moved to today's Israel to fight the discrimination they faced in Europe. We call this Zionism. New York and Chicago similarly attracted Jews as they were welcome there. San Francisco is regarded as the gay capital, where homosexuals moved in to be free from discrimination. New Hampshire is the place of the Free State Project, where libertarians moved to be able to fight government regulation. Texas has been the destination for many conservatives for its general conservative culture. Vermont attracted several environmental activists. All these examples show how people tend to move to places where they are surrounded by people who they tolerate. Separatist movements, such as the previously mentioned case with Pakistan and India, are also notable examples where people did not wish to be ruled by people who they did not tolerate. And with this, we can transition to the topic on how suppressing natural discrimination fails. Separatist movements I mentioned before are the most notable examples of that. One example that is often brought up is the case of Switzerland, where multiculturalism caused bloody wars and terrorist acts, which is the reason why the governmental power in the country was decentralized and have been passed to the individual cantons that are unique to specific ethnicities. Throughout history, there has always been a tendency of multicultural societies breaking up. Eritrea split off Ethiopia. Czechoslovakia split into two countries. The Soviet Union completely disintegrated and fall into small ethnic components. Let's not even mention the case of Yugoslavia. Notice how all of these examples are related to some sort of forced integration where an ethnic group is forced to live together or otherwise associate with other ethnic groups. In history, you can never point out a working multicultural society which did not end up in conflicts. Even large cities that are deemed multicultural are divided up to their respectable districts, which often host a specific ethnic group. The most famous one of these are Chinatowns. Right now, there are several ongoing attempts of forced integration where people are forced to accept people of different ethnicities or cultural background, which I will refrain from mentioning so I don't get banned. But I hope that the examples I gave just now were fulfilling. And now we arrive at the main point of the video, where we discuss the legal justification for the freedom of association and disassociation. This portion deals with proving the criminality of the enforcement of tolerance and non-discrimination. Any attempts to force someone to interact with another person or to provide services to someone implies a violation of property rights and is therefore a crime. This is because property rights define who gets the right to exclude other individuals from employing a scarce mean. In other words, property rights are conflict-avoiding norms that deal with conflicts over scarce resources that arise due to the fact that no thing or part of thing can be used by more than one person at a time. Property rights are the only universally applicable solution to philosophic law, a subset of ethics concerning solving conflicts over scarce means, as other solutions are either not universally applicable or presuppose possibilities such as communal ownership, which implies a contradiction. To force an individual to not discriminate or refuse to offer services for an individual is to violate his property rights, as everyone has ownership of his own body. And since a person has an exclusive right of his own body, every other actor that forces that person to do something must be deemed a criminal by law. If a bakery opens and it refuses to sell goods to certain people for any reason, he is doing so completely legally. Similarly, an imaginary store owner has the right to remove any person who he doesn't wish to see in his store anytime. The same logic can be applied to local communities or any private area. A park owner has the right to exclude people who do certain things on his property, and the same thing applies to private highways, bridges, or any neighborhood with a person of legal authority, such as a voluntary council or a town hall. Now let's see how we can apply the right to discriminate against problematic individuals. So far we have discussed three important things. First, that intolerance towards certain people or behaviors is fundamental of human nature. Second, that history has always shown a pattern where genetically or culturally similar individuals tend to live together. Moreover, that attempting to suppress these will result in bloody civil wars and violent conflicts. And finally, that everybody has the right to self-ownership, and therefore the right to associate and disassociate. If we refer back to the previous doctor example, we can see that discrimination is a tool that people can choose to live with or not live with, which is determined by their values. This means that although people always have the right to disassociate, it is not always rational to do so. But now, let's apply this to furries with an example. If you are the owner of a park and you wish to attract clients, you have to put efforts into eliminating the factors that can cause disruption of peace. For example, littering, annoying people, and other similar factors. Let's remember that fursuits are toys used for satisfying one's sexual or other weird needs. Depending on the judgment of you or your clients, you might consider these suits to be disgusting and something that disrupts the peace in your park, and therefore banning them does not only satisfy your intolerant ends, but also increases your profit, as your park will be more attractive. Another good appliance of this can happen in closed communities where one person or council has the communal authority to kick people out who cause problem. In this scenario, if the community holds views against people like furries, it is no question that they will not be welcome and that they won't be able to settle down. Note, however, that this type of physical removal can not only happen through the means of legal segregation, but also through the means of harassment and hate speech, which applies pressure on unwanted people to leave. I explained the legal aspect of the right to free speech in my previous video if you want to know about that. Check it out. I also want to reflect on the events at Nebo Middle School in Utah 2 months earlier, as it is a perfect example where students started to have enough of the behavior of furries and organized a protest against them. The students of this school are forced to associate with furries who they do not wish to be next to, and the consequences perfectly demonstrate how forced integration fails. And it even gives r/Anti-Furry in action a reason to cope. That's all I wanted to say in this video. If you have any questions, make sure to leave it in the comments section so I can respond. See you next time.